All right, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is having a great day. I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. My name is Neosha Franklin, and I am the Director of Communications at the St. Louis Community Foundation. Some of you look very familiar. Thank you for joining us today. If you are new, this is a training that the St. Louis Community Foundation offers to nonprofits, part of our Give STL Day trainings for free. Just so you know, too, we will have this video training actually recorded and posted on our Give STL Day website, and we will also send it out via email if you or your colleagues were unable to attend or if you wanted to go back and watch. We do have two interpreters with us today. Thank you both for being here. We will ask you all try to keep yourself muted throughout the entire presentation so that everyone can hear Katie talk about endowments today. And then also we will take questions throughout. We'll try to, so if you want to drop them in the chat, we'll try to answer your questions as we go. But if not, we definitely will save time at the end for you to ask your questions. My colleague Emily Kaiser is also online here with us today. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to either message myself or Emily and we will help you. So with that, we will go ahead and get started, and I will let Katie Knapp, our Director of Giving Strategies, introduce herself, give a little background about herself, and get the presentation started. So again, thank you all for joining us. All right, Katie, hold on, just unmuted you. Let's get you unmuted.
I unmuted myself. I
there
saw
we go.
that. Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues, Neosha Franklin and Emily Kaiser, for being my technical support. That is not my forte. So I have Emily forwarding my slides, and I guess both of them will be monitoring the chat button for me. So I hope we use that a lot because, well, first let me introduce myself and then I'll get into my program. Yes, my name is Katie Knapp, and I am the Director of Giving Strategies at the St. Louis Community Foundation. And I too, thank you very much. I look outside, it's a little cloudy. It's still a beautiful day, but I really thank you for joining me as we explore endowment. And right now, in my effort to try to make this presentation not me just talking to you, but get you involved as much as possible, quickly off the top of your head, I don't want you to think about it. I want you to type into the chat the first word, one word that comes into your mind when I say the word endowment. Thank you all. Keep supplying the chat, because I've learned today that we are, right now I see 34 participants, and I think we were expecting, upwards of, a large group. We have a large group. And what I realized as I was preparing this presentation is that we are composed of a wide variety of individuals and organizations. Our nonprofit organizations are unique. Our role within our organization will be unique, and the age and stage of what we know about endowment and what we know about our nonprofit and the whole fundraising process is really varied. So for some of you, this presentation might be review. Others of you, if you have questions, as Neosha said, I've dedicated some time at the end to answer those questions, and I am going to make an attempt to pause throughout the presentation just to give you guys a chance to comment, ask questions, and also for me to slow down. You'll find that I talk very quickly. So I went to my LinkedIn profile to try to get the most succinct introduction of me. And I did think I worked on it. I had fun working on it. And I thought that it gave you all a good, quick insight to who I am and how I prepared this presentation. I consider myself a proven estate planner and an optimistic fundraiser. I will include that I am a dog lover, and during this year that we've gone through with the pandemic, I have become quite the backyard bird watching enthusiast. Full disclosure, that has nothing to do with endowment. It's just a little bit about me. And if we're talking about endowment in the future and you like dogs and want to share any of your bird watching experience, I'd love to hear it. So anyway, so for the majority of my career, 29 years thereof, I have been actively practicing law. And the majority of those years, I was with Thompson Coburn doing in their private client group, which in short means I was helping people with their estate planning. I would work with their financial advisors, their accountants, and often with nonprofit organizations if that came into their plan. I had colleagues who specialized more in working directly with nonprofits, but I did have the opportunity to do a few 1023s for some nonprofits. I did go over and talk to a couple of boards about thinking about what endowment meant to them and if it made sense to them. But the most important thing I want you to know about me and my role with the Community Foundation is that I am proud to be a fundraiser. That is a part of my job now, and it coordinates really well with my skills as an attorney. And as we go through this presentation, I'll explain a little bit about why I am proud to be a fundraiser. And I'm sure all of you on this call, no matter what your role or the Zoom is with your organization, you're proud to be a fundraiser too. It's really a noble profession. So we can go to the next slide, please. So, there's a big picture of me. And yes, again, you can see my name, Katie Knapp, Director of Giving Strategies. And I wanted to take the time right now to tell you how I organized this presentation. I have found that endowment means so many things to so many people. And when I was trying to narrow this down and pick out those aspects of it that I thought would be most valuable for you, these are the three things I came up with. It depends, your mission, and your fundraising cycle. So you'll see those themes run throughout this presentation. Next slide, please. So what is endowment? I would love Emily or Neosha, whoever, will you read, just out of curiosity, what were some of the words that people came up with when they thought about endowment?
Sure. The first word was death, which is kind of sad. Estate, money, school, future, savings account, universities, college, marriage, tough with an exclamation point, recurring, wealth, permanent, and money.
I just love that exercise because you know what? Those are all right. That is what is so overwhelming and wonderful about endowment. None of those are wrong. And that's where you understand how I get on my themes, how we can get our hands around this very large concept and pull it down so it's meaningful for you and you can make endowment work for you and your nonprofit organization. Next slide, please. So when I was doing my research and preparing for this presentation, I went to my old standby. And if I hadn't told you that I had a career of 29 years, and I didn't tell you, but I graduated from law school in 1992. So full confession that I am not a spring chicken. So I went to my trusty dictionary. I love the dictionary. I thought that would be, in this vast subject of endowment, the best place to start to think about how I would introduce and educate you on endowment. So I go there, and when I first read the definition, the act or processing of endowing. Wow, yeah, that's helpful. And then the next one, something that is endowed, but at least specifically the part of an institution's income derived from donations. Okay, that's targeting it a little bit more so where it's helpful and we can see what it is and how we can make this concept work for our nonprofit organization. And then there was the third definition, natural capacity, power, or ability. Well, that shows you the beauty and the frustration with our English language that has really nothing to do. It's a great word if you're writing this and that. So I focused on the two aspects of it. And I did, in my frustration, I did like, thanks dictionary. So I went to the dictionary and I looked up, so I guess I have to look up what endow means. And there we got a little bit more specific: to supply with property, income, or a source of income. Narrowed it down a little bit, but not tremendously. And I wavered, group, whether I wanted to include this slide or not include it at all. But as I thought about my themes, that it depends, and then your mission, and then thinking about your fundraising cycle, that the idea that it is so vast was a really good starting point for this talk. So next slide, please. So I mentioned, so I went first to the dictionary and it gave me a very, very broad definition. And then I realized, to make this meaningful to me and to you all, people who are nicely dedicating an hour of your time with me, is I had to go to the mission of the St. Louis Community Foundation, because endowment's not going to make any sense unless I am always focusing on what my mission is. So I just took the opportunity to be able to read and think about our mission. So the St. Louis Community Foundation mission is to inspire purposeful philanthropy that connects community and donors to build and preserve a more equitable and vibrant region now and forever. So the first, if I can have one takeaway with endowment, that you cannot think about endowment and your organization without having your mission right in front of you and consistently referring back to that, because that will get to you from this vast world of endowment to decide if endowment's right for you, when endowment's good for you, and what kind of endowment might be good for you. Because this, as I said, very often depends. That's my second mission. And there is a little tongue in cheek in that, you all, because attorneys often, I realized through law school and my 29 years of practicing law, that the answer often is, it depends. And a little bit that you think that's deflection and that's, just being an attorney. But you realize, what I have realized, that very little in our world is black and white. It's all shades of gray. And this depends will help you wrap your arms around endowment and how it will be beneficial to you. Next slide, please. So in my research, I came across just numerous definitions of endowment. So I picked 3 here that I want to read to you that focuses again on why you need to focus on your mission, why it depends, and then also, as we get further in the presentation, your fundraising cycle. I like this first definition because it takes endowment when you think of it as a fund. And an endowment fund is a fund which requires the principal of the fund to remain intact in perpetuity, or for a defined term of years, or until assets have been accumulated to achieve a designated purpose. Yet again, this is better than my dictionary definition, but it still has a lot of variety in there. It shows you that endowment can be many things. If I was to put in the chat before I had done all my research, I probably would have come up with the idea of permanent as well. That's why I included the second definition, or attribute of endowment is that assets in endowment fund are invested for growth, and only a defined percentage of the fund, and our mathematical people, I'm an attorney and I did like math in high school, but I've gone away with it. Our actuaries tell us that percentage usually runs for permanent endowed funds to about 3 to 5%. So it's a percentage of the fund is distributed to a nonprofit organization on an annual basis. This definition really assumes that you're doing one of those endowments that you're thinking of being perpetual, that it's going to be permanent. Whereas if you think about the one thing concept that I liked about this definition that we've not yet talked about is the idea of endowment funds, whether they are for perpetuity, a defined term of years, or to achieve a purpose, there is this concept that the money you get is invested. So you have the benefit of money, of utilizing money. So there will be growth. So it's not just the money that you raise, that the money earns money on itself. So that is a unique aspect of any kind of endowment, whether it, as I said, it is for perpetuity, a defined term of years, or purpose. When you get down to the concept of this true permanent endowment, that is the idea that the funds will never be completed. And that highlights the value of investing this money, that if you start with a certain amount of money, and then you only take the interest or a portion of the interest, even that base amount becomes larger and larger, so you can count on a source of income year after year, which by the rules of investment, again, I am not in investment management, but if you've seen those charts, they go like this, but they usually go up. So I thought this gave you more of a solid idea of the specifics of endowment. Next slide, please. So the biggest word, as I said, investing, stability is another one of those words that after my research, before my research, I would have said permanent. After my research, I would have said stability. All of the articles, or many of the articles I read, what they advocate and why they present endowment as a favorable thing for organizations to pursue is stability. Next slide, please. And stability. So what does that mean? It allows you, an endowment fund allows a nonprofit to be able to plan, as this is, beyond the current fiscal year. And the value is both for those years that are lean and prosperous. We've gone through a pretty unique year, and having some stability really did help many nonprofit. And what I've learned with businesses, it was interesting as I've worked with different clients, some businesses, even in this COVID year, these were more prosperous years. For others, it was more lean. So you really can't determine the future and how it might affect your nonprofit. So that is the one idea of the stability. As it says down one line, so an endowment fund can be an additional source of income for your nonprofit. What kind of source will depend, that's my theme, it depends on whether it's an endowment that was set up for perpetuity or for a term of years or for a particular purpose. And with that, the idea of it being a source of income does reduce a nonprofit's dependency on annual fundraising. For those of us who are involved in that annual fundraising, there is a lot of stress, a lot of time and effort on the annual fundraising. So if you can have some of that pressure taken off, that is an advantage of the stability of an endowment fund. An endowment fund, this is goes to the heart and soul of we fundraisers, is it can appeal to donors. It can suggest that your nonprofit organization will exist long into the future. And it can also be a way for donors to be true to something that's really important to them, that they're passionate about, where they can very specifically define a program or cause for which they want to dedicate their gift. Next slide. But for everything that's good, there's the opposite side. So the biggest disadvantage of an endowment fund is it's restricted. How it's restricted, again, that goes to it depends. But in general, a nonprofit, when you have some kind of endowment fund, you cannot spend the money in that fund for your current needs. That could be problematic. Also, when you have gotten a gift from a donor and they have dedicated it to a program or a cause, the purpose of an endowment cannot be changed. That is the agreement you have made, whether it's with the board resolution, which we'll talk about later, or with the donor. Some of you, I liked your words. I heard a lot of you think about universities, schools. I understand why that would be the first word. We have heard universities and schools do seem to be those organizations that have most of them have an endowment and a rather large one. I think Harvard's, I don't remember the exact funds amount, was just enormous. And some of those universities got criticized because they couldn't pivot. They had all this money, but they couldn't use it during this last year. Well, that's a function of how those dollars were restricted. So endowments, although my feeling is that they are generally a good thing, be aware that as you talk to people and as you pursue endowment funds, that some people don't always have positive opinions of endowment funds. That's a place where you as the fundraiser can educate them and explain and get a meeting of the minds. But just remember, I think there are, I'm interrupting myself, I think there are more advantages to an endowment fund, but they are restricted. Okay, next slide. I'm going to pause. Everyone, are there any questions at this point?
I do not have any in the chat.
Nobody in the chat. Okay, so I just wanted to get, so why endowment? And when I was trying to address this part of why, you can go to the next slide, Yosha, this is where I will touch base most on my third theme. And no, endowment, I am being, silly is not the right word, but no, endowment isn't exactly the same thing as fundraising. But as I've alluded to previously in my presentation, if you don't think about fundraising, you cannot get your arms around this vast concept of endowment. So I thought it was worth talking a little bit about the fundamentals of fundraising and how that can help you and your organization determine the what, when, whys, and how of fundraising. So I was fortunate enough, since I am new to this fundraising aspect, to attend a course at the Lilly Fundraising School. And I have shared with you in these next couple slides, ways they characterize fundraising. And I just found it really inspirational and just worth sharing with you. So when you think about fundraising, it's the exchange of values. And whether your title is fundraising or whether it's in development, when I looked up the definition of development and was thinking about that in preparation of this presentation on endowment, is what are we really doing as fundraisers? We're trying to understand our donors and potential donors, what their philanthropic values are. And remember, Another definition I got from the Lilly Fundraising School is, what is philanthropy? It's voluntary action for the public good. So as we try to understand what our donors, what motivates them, what their philanthropic values are, this is where it again comes to our mission. We have to explore how those values align with our organization's mission and values. And then we get the opportunity to invite those others to donate their time, their wealth, and their advocacy. When we're talking about endowment, wealth usually is an important one of those invitations, but this concept of your values and your mission and what motivates your donors has to factor into how you decide to pursue endowment. The next slide, please. I love this quote. This is another one. What is fundraising? It's the gentle art of teaching others the joy of giving. And when we are teaching others the joy of giving, that is where we focus again on our values, on the mission, and how they give. So when you are thinking about an endowment, that can help somebody give in a way they hadn't thought of again. So as you are planning and thinking about your endowment, fundraising, and your mission, think about that it's teaching others the joy of giving, and that should factor into your endowment plan. Next slide, please. So I know I am driving this point home excessively, but I just thought it was time to think about, again, fundraising. There are 4 legs to the fundraising. And some of you may be focused on your annual fund exclusively. Perhaps that your nonprofit does have a major gift program. That has a different plan and strategy. Perhaps you have a capital campaign going on. And finally, there's planned giving. We don't see the word endowment specifically in this 4-legged, the 4 legs of the fundraising stool. But if you explore and deep dive into each of these legs, so to speak, you'll see endowment relates to each of those. So you can't think about, as I've said probably 100 times during this presentation, but it's so important to me. It was my aha moment that endowment really has to be embedded in how you think of the entire fundraising for your organization. Next slide, please. So this is my favorite slide, and I think it's the culmination of my research and how I got my mind around endowment and how best to explain it to my varied audience today. It is part of good financial planning that ensures a nonprofit organization will be around in the future to carry out its mission. So it brings the idea of mission and then financial planning, because fundraising is where you get your finances, so to speak. It's all about planning and your mission. So that's how it depends how your endowment will look for your organization. Next slide. Okay. Take a little bit of a pause here. Oops.
Yep, we do have one question in the chat.
Okay.
The question is, how can our organization be certain that our endowment is invested in a way that is morally and ethically in line with our beliefs?
That is a fantastic question, and I will address that. That is when you, my camera, can you guys still see me? My screen went black.
Yes, I can still see you.
Isn't that interesting? So my screen went black, so I will follow along slides here on my thing. I don't know what my computer is doing. It's plugged in, excuse me. Okay. When you get to the point where you have an endowment fund, you will choose, one of the steps in that is you will choose an investment strategy. And that is a vital point of who you will hire to do that and who you will work with to do that. I will, if I don't more fully answer that question when I have talked about, when I get to the end of my presentation, please ask it again, okay? Do not know. Are you still there?
Yep, we can see you.
Isn't this weird? My screen is absolutely blank. And I don't know why. Technology. Anyway, so we can go to the next slide. So I was talking about, now I'm getting into the specifics of when and how does endowment work. And this comes back to my initial things, is it depends. So we can go to the next slide, Neosha, too. So there's no getting around that money enables your missions. And the first, when you're thinking about when to start an endowment, if you don't already have one, the first step is always going to be making sure that you have adequate cash to pay for the operating expenses of your organization and for your program. So you have to have, before you even think about restricting some of your funds, you have to have liquid assets and those that are unrestricted. And equally important as the management of your thing and the board of your organization has to have a realistic picture of how much income you need to run your organization. Next step. Next slide, rather. So there is this balancing act of having financial flexibility versus the stability. If you have a fund that is only kicking you out a certain amount of money, you can't dip into that if it's restricted in that way. So it's nice that you know that you're always going to have that income each year, and the way it's invested, it's going to grow. But if you need more than that and without that, your organization won't survive, that becomes a problem. So those are the initial thoughts you have to think about when you think about when you want to start your endowment, if it's right for you. Getting back to the slide when I was talking about restrictions on it, there are comments all over the board that endowments are a very powerful tool, but some people think that an endowment is not right for every organization. On the converse side, some people think, well, we're too small, we shouldn't have an endowment. I have read articles where that advocate that an endowment can be start with any amount of money, that no money is too small, but no amount of money is too little. But the important thing to think about is how that endowment rather is a long-term project. So if perhaps it's not right for you, but perhaps it is, and because you are small, don't let that discourage you. Keep on thinking about your overall mission, your fundraising cycle, and the uniqueness of your organization. So that's why I'm assuming, because I can't see it, but we're on the balancing act slide with the rocks. And it says that I like this quote from GuideStar. Most of our readers are convinced that endowments are good things. If their organizations do not have endowments, it's because they can't justify diverting money from programs to start them. And I think that this is such a valuable quote because perhaps following the logic of maybe it doesn't make sense for a nonprofit to have a endowment. That could be true. So maybe that's why they can't justify diverting money for that reason. Or perhaps they just haven't thought about that. Perhaps we do have money we can divert. Perhaps we can't plan or talk to our donors. This gets back to it's a balancing act, and it depends on your organization, your values, your mission, and the successes and challenges that your fundraising cycle has had. So next slide, Neosha. I did take the opportunity on slide 20 to repeat my favorite slide. And I think if this is something that you all take away, I will have been successful, that whether you have an endowment, and I haven't said yet that we don't have to think of these as a singular fund. You could have many funds or a couple funds. I think many when I tell you about the community foundation, because that's in my head. But you could have different endowment funds that
there used to be.
serve different purposes. So again, this is the best definition I think that helps all of us, is that in any endowment funds or a couple of endowment funds, they're part of good financial planning that ensures that your nonprofit will be around in the future to carry out your mission. Next slide, where I'm talking, this is should be the 3 types of endowment. So I wanted to take this opportunity to dive down into these types. I've touched on this a little bit, but talking about going from my Webster's dictionary down to even, I'm getting now more specific. I want to read what the definition of a permanent endowment. And permanent is also often called true. And these kind of permanent and true endowments require that the principal amount from a donor gift to be held in perpetuity with the intent that it grows in value each year, so the earnings are available for expenditures as stipulated by the donor or based on the endowment's purpose. So generally, and I love when every definition you read, there's always the caveat, generally, so not always, but the principal amount is not invaded to fund your nonprofit's annual operating expenses. And we'll touch a little bit on, in following slides, how they're created and who creates them. The quasi-endowment, its definition, excuse me, a definition, pardon me, that I found to be helpful for myself is they include organizational funds, so your funds that you get that are directed to an endowment by an individual or group, and this is generally your board of directors for a specific purpose. A quasi-endowment has the same characteristics as a true endowment, but the restriction is the idea that but it lacks the restriction that it has to be held permanently. The principle of a quasi-endowment, it is expected that it may be spent at a future date, so it's a little bit less restricted. I added the 3rd type of endowment as the term endowment. It in essence is a quasi endowment, but often, and it's funds that we deal with here, that donors or endowments are set up so money is invested, so you have the benefit of the investments growing the pot of money from which you are to spend. But given the purpose or why the donor wants to give you a gift to create this endowment, it makes more sense for it to be held for a number of years. So you still have, the nonprofit still has the stability of knowing we're going to get X amount of dollars for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and that amount will grow. So when you think of permanent and quasi, a very, very common quasi type of endowment is the term, whereas I like to think of quasi, there could be something to do with the purpose of why this, so the purpose of the endowment defines the time, as opposed to perpetuity, or actually a term of years dictating the endowment. So next fund. So I told you, so how do you create next fund? Next slide, please. How is an endowment fund created? Well, generally, yet again, a document will govern how the endowment operates. So the two most common types is that your board will create a resolution, and this resolution will be the result of your research and thinking about what kind of endowment your organization needs and what will best serve your mission. So there'll be some kind of written documentation. As I said, from the board, it's usually a resolution. You can also have an endowment that's created by a donor. That would be an agreement that the donor enters into with you and your organization. Thinking back to the question that was asked, sometimes endowments are created by perhaps an investment strategy. So there is no unique one have-to way to create it. Just know there will be some kind of written documentation which will encompass all the thinking and the planning and help you support your mission and your fundraising. Next slide. So in my research, it seems like 5 is the magic word, in fact, magic number, that there seems like there are 5 steps if you want to start your endowment. I don't know why. Maybe that 5, it's my favorite number, but I don't think that has anything to do with why there are 5 steps. But step 1, if you look at this, encompasses, I think, the themes that I've been talking about as much. The first thing you need to do is implement an organizational business plan that is based on your financial planning, that's drawn from my favorite slide here, and management, and once again, your mission. So the first thing is you really have to plan. That's when we take in the balancing act. How much money do you need for your operating things? Can you divert or can you not? Is this the right time for you? Get back to my thing, it depends. Step 2, I thought this was interesting that you do have to, often boards, they don't know, they haven't thought about endowments. And it might be your position as your role in your organization to talk to your board about the benefits, the pros and cons of endowment, and when it might make sense for you to pursue some kind of endowment, whether it is permanent or quasi, for a purpose or for a particular program. And you might think of first starting, when we thought of that slide where a lot of times they just can't justify diverting money from your operating source of cash, is first start creating a cash reserve fund, so that that money doesn't have any restrictions on it, and you can experiment with having money that you're not depending on for your yearly operating budget. You can explore with investing it, seeing how that works. Then you can look and talk to different investment managers to ensure that it is invested in a way that aligns with your mission and with your values. There are funds, that is now a very reasonable, and it is easier, I have found, in the investment world to pick plans where the money is invested in things that align with your mission and your values. The third step is an idea of once you feel comfortable with having this cash reserve, if that's worked for you, then set up an endowment fund where you feel more comfortable with the restrictions that will be imposed on it. The step 4, and this specifically addresses this question, is you will look. This is going to be a process. You're going to look for investment managers that often offer suitable strategies for you. And they say a lot of it, they're thinking about the risk involved. So your investment strategy of how much growth you want to take, and that gets into the nitty-gritties of investment strategy. But you can if this is important to you, talk to that investment manager. And when you interview them, ask questions of, can we have a fund that is sustainable? Can we have a fund that doesn't invest in companies that go against our values? That is a very valid and important question to have as you think about who will invest this money for you, because we know that is an aspect, that is a benefit, that is what endowment does. It uses the power and the benefit of vesting the money so it grows on itself. The third step, or fifth step rather, is the idea that you have these endowments and now you incorporate them into not only your capital gains, but all of your fundraising. And then you do let your endowment advertise your endowment, you market it. All of these steps, I feel like step 1, I have made the focus of this presentation. Each of these steps could be an hour-long presentation themselves. And I'm looking now at my time. I've got about 13 minutes left. So realize that I'm trying to give you an overview of endowment, but we could really do an hour-long on each of these aspects. I'm going to pause now. Next slide. We're blue, where it should say St. Louis Community Foundation can be your endowment partner. I'll take a breath. Any more questions, Neosha?
No, we don't have any questions as of yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is the time when I am excited to talk about St. Louis Community Foundation in particular and how we could be your endowment partner. I want to again, so we can go to the next slide, Neosha. We're talking about, so I was thinking about 3 aspects of how, excuse me, St. Louis Community Foundation can partner with you, our fellow nonprofit organizations, is we have an endowment. And to understand our endowment, I want to again talk a little, to repeat our mission. So the St. Louis Community Foundation inspires purposeful philanthropy that connects community and donors to build and preserve a more equitable and vibrant region now and forever. So in 2020, and I realize that if you've attended our prior trainings on this, for what Give STL Day, you've heard that in 2020, through our donors and us, we granted over $119 million to over 2,300 nonprofits and some individuals too. The individuals come from what we talk about our employee cares fund, because usually we cannot give to individuals. We have to jump through the IRS hoops. But so we have 460 donor advised fund, 130 designated funds, 97 fields of interest fund, 64 scholarship funds, and we have our own endowment fund. And our endowment fund is really unique in our opportunity, is that that's a source that we think of as we can make more grant making from that. So we don't use our endowment fund to support our operations. We look at this as a way to help our community. We we believe high tides raise all ships. Is more successful all your nonprofits are, the more successful, more vibrant, and the more we meet our mission. So who we serve, it was important, is we serve donors, professional advisors, the community, and private foundations. So thinking of that is the next. So we do have our endowment, but our endowment is just as unique as yours will be. I'm trying to get to the next slide, sorry. Or not next slide, but so we have our endowment, and that is where we try to raise funds so we can make more grants unrestricted, same thing, because we do many of the grants we make through, we are restrict ourselves, our donors, our donor intent, we follow that. So our endowment is where we have the decision to see what's going on in the St. Louis area and help. But we can also, because we do sponsor, just like our donor advised funds and our designated funds, where we're the sponsors for donors, we can sponsor your endowment. The benefit of that is, remember step 4, where you had to look for your investment managers? When we sponsor your endowment, we do that function for you. We do have, when talking about how we run your endowment, ours is a true and permanent endowment. And we are even more conservative when we talk about working with you to help you with your endowment fund. We look at it as a true endowment, that the amount that you start your endowment with, we will never encroach upon that. That is the policy that our board and our financial team takes, because we think of that kind of perpetuity being so important. We do there our range. If you wanted to look at that, we ask that your nonprofit have anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. I say that depends, because we'll work with you and help you decide if you have gotten, when you've planned in your financial planning, if this really is the best fit, if we're the best fit for to help you manage and take care of this endowment fund. We add an extra protection because we have a board and you have a board. One of the benefits of us sponsoring your endowment is you do have another safeguard, that for the reason, if your board establishes this endowment and they have a specific purpose, we will work with your board and take notes, and we have that historical knowledge. So 20, 30 years down the road, if a new board comes to your organization and wants to change the purpose, you have the flexibility that our board will be able to see what's going on, but also the protection that if that board has deviated from the initial purpose that was really good, there's a safeguard on that. We also, pick the investment strategy for you, so that's something you don't have to think about, along with the spending rate. Our board for our endowed funds sets a spending rate each year. And so a lot of the work's taken out. It might be the right fit for you, it might not be. Another option, I've talked about designated funds. If you have a donor who wants to make a gift to you, but they want to have, donors like control, which we've seen. If they want to have a certain amount of control, they can set up a designated fund with us. That means that your nonprofit is the recipient of that gift, but the donor can then put the restrictions that make them feel comfortable on. So that is a way that you can have the joy, really have your donor give how they want to, but be able to craft agreement with us. And then you do have that expectation. So it can be a win-win for the donor, for you. And we're just an intermediary. So if you're not in the position to set up an endowment yourself and need this help, this is an option for you, a way we can help you. So I think that's the final slide. I've got 6 minutes for questions. So
Sure.
My final
So
question, if there are any.
there are a few actually. So, all right. So I have a few questions, and we'll start with one that says, this is from Darcy. Thank you, Darcy. What is the minimum amount that can be put into an endowment?
It depends. I saw an article where people were putting, if you're setting one up with us, I know our minimums. I said $100,000, but you can start up an endowment with any amount. That's where it comes with you make the decision to put that aside and let that money grow. So it can be saying that you want to put $70 away each month. That's when you get into the nitty gritties of how you want to set up that endowment. I'm sorry for the vague answer, but it really can be as small as possible if you decide you want to have that fund be restricted.
Another question. This is from Steve Backer. I believe I said that right. My apologies. Any tips on simple ways to explain an endowment to donors with the purpose of growing an endowment?
That's a really great question. So again, I would start with your mission and why you want the stability and what kind of endowment you're thinking. Is it going to be for a program? Is it going to be in perpetuity? One that you consider in perpetuity, where you are going to use this fund and ask people to donate to it, so you get a bigger base and it then provides you with a source of income. I think that you need to start with what your mission is and why you want this endowment, and start with your values and think about, and then ask that donor, why are you appealing to that donor? What about that donor's values coordinates with yours that you'd make that ask for perhaps a bigger gift or for a program? I think those are the issues that I would think about as I was thinking about a particular donor, or I'd think about my donors in categories of how I might address each different kind of donor and how I would present donor how I'd present that aspect based on my fundraising plan, which goes back to my mission and values.
Yeah, you have another one. Do most nonprofits have one endowment or more than one? And I'm going to follow up with that. What do you recommend?
Oh, goodness. And I have no idea. I full disclosure that it will depend on your organization. I would guess that I think probably they start with one, and when they're successful, if their programs, I don't think there's right or wrong. I wish there was a most for this. I don't think there is. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know if there isn't, what most people do, if that's important for what you should do as your organization, because it's really what makes sense for your organization, where you are right now and where you want to go in the future.
Mm-hmm. So this is piggybacking off of the question regarding the simple ways of explaining the operating reserve. So any tips on simple ways to explain operating cash reserves to donors with the purpose of growing this fund and possibly creating an endowment? We have the cash reserve fund already, but it is challenging explaining this to donors and funders that typically give for tangible items such as books, backpacks, car seats, etc.
That is such a good question. I think I don't know if it is simple, so I don't know if I can give simple tips. I think that is, as you know your donor, it goes back to another thing I learned in the fundraising school, that it's the right person asking the right donor for the right gift at the right time. And that is so donor specific and asks specific. So I think it's just thinking through, is developing that relationship with the donor, talking to them more, explaining your mission, explaining your values, And as they understand and being very transparent, I guess the best advice is being very transparent about your finances, that this is your operating budget, and thank you so much for providing these and showing the value of if we did have money that then we could invest and give us more stability, that's how it would help us. So I think educating them, taking this presentation, I don't think it's that fantastic, but educating on them of what do they think endowment is, and do they have a negative connotation about it? Can you make it more positive, just to show them the value? And because it all goes back to, it's the gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving. So it's that education. It's just really taking the time to understand what they think endowment is, and explain what you think endowment is and why you think it's so beneficial to your organization. And if you're talking to them because they most likely share the same values, they will understand why maybe a different gift or a larger gift could be beneficial, and why that will give them joy to do that.
Thank you, Katie. All right, it is 2:01. I wanted to see if anyone has any additional questions. I just want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time today. Okay, I don't see any in the chat. So I want to thank Katie for taking some time today to talk to us and educate us on endowments. I also want to thank our interpreters for joining us today. Thank you very much for providing your services. This training and this recording will be available on our Give STL Day website. Just go to the training section on the site. We'll also email it out to you all, and then also post it in our Give STL Day collaborative community. So if you do have questions regarding endowment, how the St. Louis Community Foundation can help you or talk with you in any capacity around endowment, starting an endowment, please be sure to reach out to us at info@stlgives.org. And we will put you in contact with Katie or another member of our team to kind of get those conversations started. So again, I thank you all for joining us today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week, and hope that you are advertising early giving, because our platform is open to accept donations. And we are looking forward to an awesome giving day. Thank you all for joining us today, and you all have a great day.